This program on women in science, technology, and business has been brought to you by Zoho Corporation.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kamla. On today's show, we're talking about science, technology, and dance. My guest, Rasika Kumar, is a software engineer at Google, and she's also a professional dancer who has been dancing since the age of 4, and she's been doing classical Indian dancing known as Bharatanatyam.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I think you're one of the few people I've come across who combine the interests of both their parents. Your father is an engineer, your mother is a dancer.
Yes, that's correct.
How did that work out for you?
Yeah, it sounds rather obvious when you put it that way, but I think the dance was the most obvious. When I was young, I mean, it was inevitable that both myself and my sister would be involved in dance. It was just in our house all the time, and we definitely grew up with it and grew up in that community. So it's not really a surprise that
You could run away from it.
I could not run away from it, and then I also later on I chose to take it seriously. So I don't think that is too much of a surprise. I think computer science, that route was a little less direct.
Why?
I always loved.
Why was it less direct?
Yeah, growing up, I always loved math and science. And of course, you know,
How did you know you liked math and science?
That's a great question. Because, I mean, there's a little bit of bias there too, because, you know, growing up in an Indian household where math and science are very, you know, highly valued.
Why did I not get that love for math and science? That's why I asked this question. How do you know?
But I mean, it worked out. In my case, it worked out. So being pushed towards things like, you know, being to succeed and excel in math and science was fine with me because I actually really enjoyed it. So when I got, you know, when you study and then you get better, and then there's when you understand concepts and things click in your head and it makes sense and it finally all comes together, I really enjoyed that process. So I enjoyed like learning more and more, especially in biology and chemistry. Those were some of my favorite subjects.
Not computer science.
Not computer science. So growing up, I never really, I wasn't into video games, and I didn't really, you know, love anything about computers per se. I used a computer, but I wasn't really drawn to anything about computer science. My father's a hardware engineer, and I knew very little about what he did. But I knew I loved biology and chemistry. And in fact, when I went to college, I wanted to study more biomedical engineering and go into that field. But unfortunately, my college did not offer a major in biomedical engineering. They offered a biology major, but I knew I didn't want to do just biology. And so I looked around at all of the majors and kind of by default landed on computer science as something that I thought would have the most scope and be the most flexible in sort of finding.
Let me stop you right there. Did you ask your parents for feedback?
Oh, I'm sure.
Because you said flexible and most promising and practical. So
yes, so that practical nature is definitely something I would say from my father, and it's definitely something I've inherited from him. So there was some of that too. I did take a computer science class in high school. I had taken a summer course at Stanford, and the teacher of that course was Marissa Mayer, who is now the CEO of Yahoo.
Oh, she was your teacher? I'm all ears. Tell me, what was she like?
So, I mean, she was a great teacher, and I really enjoyed it. I learned C. This is a programming language, and I thought she was a great teacher, and I believe so this would have been 1999. So she had maybe just started working at Google, because she was first at Google. And I didn't realize this until much later. When in fact, when I started at Google, she was in one of the meetings, and I recognized her as being.
Did she recognize you?
No, I don't think she recognized me.
So you learned C from Marissa Mayer.
Yeah,
at Stanford.
Yeah, at Stanford when I was in high school.
Okay.
Yes.
Where'd you go to school?
For college,
Yeah.
I went to MIT in Boston.
Why move from the West Coast to the East Coast?
I mean, it's a great school. I think when I was applying to colleges, I looked less at location and more of just like programs and opportunities. And so I applied all over the place. And when I got into MIT, it just seemed like a great place to be, and Boston seemed like just a fun experience. I would have a fun experience in college.
So you did masters also?
Yes, both my bachelor's and master's.
And this was not in computer science at all?
Actually, it was in computer science. So my major ended up being computer science, but I had a minor in biomedical engineering.
Oh, okay.
And the research for my master's was actually computational biology. So I did something about finding, it was related to genetics in DNA and finding snippets in DNA.
Okay. Do you still keep your interest? Have you ever thought of migrating and going over the other side to 23andMe?
I thought about that a lot, but I have not kept up with some of that, which maybe is pretty telling in terms of my passion for it. When I first graduated, I looked solely in biotech, for biotech opportunities. And there just weren't that many that fit my background. A lot of them required a little more research background, or, maybe a PhD in either computer science or biology backgrounds. There wasn't anything in the entry level. And so that was when my father, again, suggested that I start looking at, opportunities that were purely software engineering. And so he definitely pushed me towards applying to Google and Yahoo and such places. And I have to say that once I started, I never really looked back. I never really looked at rejoining sort of the biotech industry for whatever reason. And it's been a great journey so far.
Okay. So you've been at Google for 10 years?
Yes.
And what do you do at Google?
I am a software engineer in local search.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the software side of it, the technology side of it. Let's move to the dancing side. It seems like you were naturally drawn to dancing because it was there in the house, like you said.
Yes.
Your mom is a cultural icon who is for the, 35 years?
Yes, 35 years, yeah.
And she founded Abhinaya Dance Company.
Mm-hmm.
And in an interview with her, she said, now I've given it to the second generation, meaning you and your sister.
Yes.
How is your involvement with dancing? How do you juggle the two, technology and dance?
It's a very good question. I get that question a lot. And I think the easiest answer is just if you know what you want to do and you know that you want to do both these things, you make it happen, right? It's time management.
What do you give up?
That's a great question. Sometimes in the beginning, I said I'm not going to give up anything. I'm going to do both and do both full time. But you give up some things. Maybe social engagements you give up. Maybe I cannot travel to some places. I cannot, do some other things. But we give these up. We have to prioritize everything in our lives, whether or not you have two careers. Like even with one career, you have to make some trade-offs. So to me, it didn't seem like, something extraordinary that I had to, no extraordinary sacrifice that I had to make. And I think a big part of that was a couple of things. Google as a company has a great culture around work-life balance. So I was able to sort of when I finished my work, I would leave it at work and then be able to come home and focus fully on dance. And the other thing is, of course, family support. If you don't have family support, then it's almost impossible. Having a husband who's really supportive and can take on other chores when I'm off in rehearsal. Of course, my parents being completely supportive, and my sister as well. So I think those two things have really, really made this smoother than it would have been otherwise.
Do you ever struggle with the decision of leaving one to focus on the other?
All the time. Since my very first day at Google, I wondered when might I leave this and do dance full time? And it's something I've thought about for 10 years. And of course, being a very practical person and knowing how hard it is to be an artist in any society, and not just in Silicon Valley, but in any part of the country. It's grueling work. So my hats off to all the artists who do this day in and day out. But I knew for me that I wasn't sure if that was a challenge I was ready for. And so I opted to stay with the stable job that I had just started, and use that, and use sort of the financial security that provided me to then support my art.
And how do you put up with criticism? as a dancer, you know, you're out there creating, working with other dancers. You're also a teacher at the Abhinaya Dance Company. And, you know, there must be folks that review your dance performances and, you know, either criticize you or, you know, praise you. How do you deal with criticism in dancing versus criticism at workplace, at Google? You know, is there a difference in the kinds of criticism or the flavor, if I can say use the term of criticism?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I mean, in software engineering, there are some things that are sort of, you know, more black and white. Your code works or it doesn't work. You know, this product was successful by some set of metrics that are very well defined, or they're not. They, you know, it's sort of more clear cut. And so feedback can be sort of pivoted around those things and be very tied to clear metrics that everybody can agree on. With dance, it's so subjective, and so it's not clear what the success metric is, right? What does it mean to have a good dance performance? Now, I may have a completely different opinion about that from the reviewer, from yet another person in the audience.
What about your mom?
How does she respond to criticism?
No, when she criticizes you,
yes.
how do you respond?
Actually, my mother's criticism is like one I value, you know, very, very highly. And so even if I know it's not something I want to hear, I still want to hear it because, of course, she's, you know, been my teacher for this entire time. And so she knows exactly, she has very high standards for what she wants. And she also knows, like, she knows what my potential is, and she wants to push me, you know, to do the best that I can do. So I take that very, very seriously. But for everyone else, it's also about like what, for an artist, you also have to look more inside and understand what did I want to accomplish with this. So I've tried to sort of define my own success metric. Like for a certain show, maybe it's not about the audience, but maybe it's about that all the audience understood what I was trying to communicate with a certain story or with a certain item. So if I feel like I hear, yes, okay, yes, we understood it, or we were moved emotionally by what you were portraying, then I find that to be success. So it's about defining, you know, your own success metric and not being too swayed. But I mean, keeping your ears open and taking in all the feedback, but not being too swayed by other people's definition of success.
Do you have a different bent of mind when you're coding versus when you are working as a dancer?
Yes and no. So I think the surprising thing for me is actually the similarities between these two processes.
How?
So the way I would describe it is actually problem solving. Both, to me, are like solving problems. There are differences, of course. But in computer science, you have a huge problem. You have some, you know, okay, here's this large problem that we're trying to solve, and you have to break it down into pieces. You have to prioritize which ones are more important than the others and figure out how to implement and sort of, you know, and slowly, incrementally work your way to a solution. With the choreography, it's exactly the same thing. You have a vision, you have something that you want to create, and you have to break that down into actionable items and figure out, okay, well, if I'm creating this trying to tell a story, well, then what's the music element? How am I going to do that? What are the steps that I'm going to include? What are the lyrics that I'm trying to incorporate and tell the story? How do I piece it all together? So it's like solving a big problem. The difference is that your process may not be as structured with dance. You have to let it breathe a little bit. You have to sort of try something and let it flow. So it's not as linear as like, okay, let's move incrementally to this final goal, but you have to maybe try something, see how it feels, like try something else, see how it feels. And you have to, I think that's the creative process, like having a little more flexibility and being a little more open to really let art happen instead of science.
Do you have an Excel spreadsheet for your dance when you break it down?
Absolutely. It's
oh
like
my
task
God.
list.
You have
Absolutely.
So you break down the dance performance into modules and see which element works and.
Sure. We have, you know, for one of our recent productions, I mean, we were just using Google Docs constantly. I mean, just to like plan out the different parts and how long each one was and what needed to happen and what was left, what tasks were not yet done, what pieces needed to be finished. And yes, it's, we have the same tools.
Did your mother use any kind of Excel spreadsheet or
My
paper?
father, I think, helped introduce some of that into the dance sort of process. One of my earliest memories actually is we have a production checklist, and it's the same checklist. And my dad would print out this checklist, and it has all of the things that you need, to take to the theater. So it includes like, okay, what about the sound equipment? Here are all the mics. Any lighting equipment? What about gels and any other gobos that we need, which are sort of like these things you put on light fixtures to project different images. So yeah, I think.
But that's on the hardware side. That's on the equipment side. But when
which is all part of it.
No, but I'm talking about the creative process itself. Did your mother use any kind of, even handwritten Excel spreadsheet or whatever, with lines and rows and columns saying, for part one, this step was not done right, or this piece of music was. Do you know what I'm saying? Because what I have seen of dancers is it's an organic process.
Yeah, I think for my mom it was more of an organic process. Certainly, when I've come in, I like that structure, and I think it helps me work. Like some things have to be structured and some things have to be organic, right? The whole thing is
what
not
is
organic. To me, organic is something where you have some idea of the destination, but you don't really try to get there in one line. It's about like feeling your way around and letting some inspiration come to you and take you and and actually maybe even your destination changes, right? It could be something, and to me that's what I consider organic, or an organic process versus something very, structured and linear that's like, well, we want to get here, there's no question about that, and we're going to move in these very clear steps towards that goal.
How do you work with your mother?
So that's a great question. I think, of course, mother and daughter, there are a lot of fun interactions and a lot of, growing pains with that. Now, I think we work, I would say we've come to a good working relationship. We discuss a lot if we have a particular productions, and we sit down and we talk a lot. We talk through a lot of ideas. We brainstorm together, and then we try and. There's some things that I will then take control of, and some things like she will take control of. So sometimes I'll set the rehearsal schedule, and then other times she will communicate with all the musicians, and she will figure out all the notes, and I'll work with the dancers. So we, in a lot of productions, we found different tasks that each of us take on, and then, that's how we share some of the responsibilities there.
What has been the role of your father in your growth as a software engineer and as a dancer? Because it turns out he is also a singer.
Yes, yeah, he's also very much into music and the arts as well. Yeah. So my father is a hardware engineer, as I mentioned before. But he definitely was very interested in both of his children being involved in math and science, and so that was clear from the beginning.
Did your mother teach you any math and science?
She did a little bit, but in fact, when I was doing my homework was actually mostly when she was teaching class. So my father was the one sitting next to me at the dining table, working through my algebra homework with me and making sure I did it right, and like coaching me through a lot of this. I remember once in 8th grade, I came home with a B on my report card, and he was extremely shocked.
That's a big no-no.
It's a big no-no, yeah. And so in order for me to get it back to an A, he basically sat down with me every night and made sure I got everything correct. And so then I worked slowly back to an A.
Why did you get a B?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's too long of probably laziness, not being thorough.
Did you not understand what the teacher was teaching you?
Probably, yeah. It was a combination of not understanding completely, right? So I understood, and I felt like that was good enough. And this is, of course, something that thoroughness and tenacity in finding the full solution is something that you learn only as you grow older. But of course, in 8th grade, this was a new thing for me. So that if I remember whatever I can remember, that's what it was. And so then he had to force me to say, no, do you understand it fully? Maybe you understood part of it, but not the whole thing. And then sort of forcing me to accept that I didn't know everything and then, learn the rest.
And what about your mother? What influence has she had on you?
So my mother, of course, like very, as a dancer, she, has been like the major influence in my life. And I think a lot of her students would agree with me that she, discipline and hard work has been really her legacy. She's not very great at self-promotion, and so I think
Do you think self-promotion is important?
I think self-promotion is very important. I'm also not very good at it. And I think it's a skill. It's a skill that you have to develop and come to terms with, especially as an artist.
Your work should speak for yourself, right?
It should, but this is a business, and business you need marketing, you need branding, and all of this actually matters a lot. Actually, talking about technology, a lot of this current technology like YouTube and videos, and this is the first time you're able to let your work speak for itself in larger forums, whereas before, it was just like by reputation or a resume that didn't really, couldn't really say much. So I do think we're in a better position, but branding and marketing will always be a need for artists.
And do you work with your company on that?
We work a little bit. So again, like I was saying, both my mother and I are have a hard time with self-promotion, and so this has been a challenge for us to sort of be comfortable with. And we've worked with some people to sort of come up with branding and marketing strategies. And actually, my husband, who's a digital marketer, he's helped a lot in some of this.
What does he do? He's where?
He works at GoDaddy in the marketing department, yeah.
Okay, so, and he pitches in and helps you all?
Yeah, for a couple of performances, he's actually come in and sort of come up with the strategy of like how we're going to sell tickets for a show and how we're going to like target different audience segments and measure, the success of that method and things like that.
Have you tried Twitter, Facebook?
Yes, we use all of those. We're active on Facebook and on Twitter as well. And so those are very valuable ways for marketing and branding. Yes.
YouTube.
YouTube, yes, definitely.
And Google local search. You're part of it.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So how has technology influenced, when you step back and when you look, how has technology influenced your whole life? Because you are part of the generation that grew up with computers at home. You are the internet kids. You know, you grew up with internet. Facebook came to you when you were at MIT. So, you had technology in the house. You lived in a connected world all the time, So how has it changed your life?
That's a great question, mostly because I don't know what life would have been without it. It's
virtual reality? Do you do virtual reality?
No, I have not. I've tried it out in demos, but I don't own any such device yet. So we'll see. But I think, living in Silicon Valley, technology, all the newest technology is always sort of very prevalent. And so it's very easy to get your hands on sort of the cool new gadgets that are coming out. And to also be very aware of, what's happening. I think technology, some surprising things in which technology has changed, it changed my life in ways that I did not expect. One is just connecting with people. I mean, the biggest sort of detractor or sort of criticism of technology was that, we're going to have all these people like not socially interacting with others and being focused on a computer or being focused on the online or virtual world. But I mean, you just take a look at Facebook, and this is where I've connected with family in India that I rarely see, and I've been able to have conversations with them. So I think technology has been really surprising and been able to connect the world and me with, with the world in surprising ways. And of course, relating back to the dance, I mean, it's been a huge part of us being able to like get people to see our work. Before, how are we going to send videos to the entire world to see this is what we can do? Now with YouTube, we can get like 1,000 or 1,000,000 views of a video, and already we've had a further reach than we've ever had in the past 30 years.
So at one end is technology, very rational and logical. At the other end is superstition. you know, do you have any superstitions about your method of work, especially dancing?
Superstitions? No, not superstitions that much. I think a lot about process, but not really superstitions. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because in India, creative types, especially dancers, they will have a certain ritual. If they don't do this, then, they may not perform well.
I see.
So it's kind of based on their own feeling. But to an outsider, it may seem baseless. You know what I'm saying? That you step on the stage with your left leg first or your right. There are these little rituals that people have.
Yeah.
Do you have any such things?
I don't really, but I can say that before a performance, there's a contradiction there because you're working so hard, but at the end it has to look effortless, right? Or you're trying to be in the moment or like focus on the details of the movement, but at the end it really has to transcend the movement. And so I think a lot about that. I think a lot about ways that will help me transcend the art or transcend what I'm working on, and always thinking about like, how can I communicate something greater than what I'm doing through the art?
If there's a young person out there, who is passionate about dancing or singing, but there's pressure from the house, from the family that he or she, go the science route, what advice would you give this young person?
Yeah.
Who did you turn to? Who did you turn to when you had those frictions?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because in the end, if you look at my career, I'm doing both. I have not chosen one over the other.
But then your parents also said do science and math.
But in the end, it's also my choice, right? Like I've been at Google for 10 years, and I don't think if I didn't like it, I would not have stuck with it for 10 years. So a big part of me staying was sort of like really enjoying the work and really enjoying not just what I was able to accomplish, but the skills I was accumulating while at Google that I realized were transferable to dance, and making me a better dancer and choreographer and more efficient in that arena. So I started to value having this career and background and sort of vice versa. There were things from my dance background, skills that I'd accumulated from choreographing and leading and directing that then transferred into my work life at Google. And in terms of like, leading a team or, getting a project to the finish line. So for me, that transfer of skills has been the most exciting. And certainly if I'd wanted to, if I wasn't happy at Google, I would have left a long time ago. So for me, it's been a great ride so far. But to a young person who wants to do art, you have to, I would say, go for it and really put your all in it, but also know that art is a business. So it's worth learning about the business of art and about the practical things that you need to accomplish in art, because that will actually help you a lot in terms of being successful.
Rasika, that was a fantastic piece of advice. Know that art is a business. No wonder that you're able to engage in both your careers, both as a dancer and as a software engineer. Thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week with another edition of our show. Until then, goodbye.
This program on women in science, technology, and business has been brought to you by Zoho Corporation.